My name is Jann Miller. I'm going to be giving your program. For those of you that don't know me, I'm president of the Native Plant Project, and I'm a plant enthusiast. I'm not a botanist, and I'm not a meteorologist or a biologist, but I am observant. And what I have noticed in the 40 years that I've been gardening here and living here in the valley is how beneficial native plants are to our environment and to us. And so I'd like to share some tips with you about that. I was very lucky in the late 90s to be able to be introduced to some wonderful people. I joined the Native Plant Project in 97. I volunteered here at the Nature Center while Christina Mild was director. And we were in the old building over there. It was nothing like this, but we all were very excited about re-vegging the park. It was mostly guinea grass and mesquite. And at the same time, I met a wonderful person, Bill McWhorter, and he was the plant surveyor for U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Texas Parks and Wildlife. And whenever they were going to purchase land, they would send him out with his friend Harold Burgess to do plant surveys. So he was very knowledgeable about the entire valley, and he had keys to these tracks. He was willing to take me out and show me all these areas from Boca Chica Beach, when it was still a Boca Chica Beach, all the way up to Zapata Falcon Dam. So I was able to learn about all the plant communities that we have in the entire valley, and it is amazing. And it really got me excited about native plants. So I just need to tell you that was my background. I'm not a master naturalist. They didn't even have master naturalists when I was doing all of that. But we certainly racked up the hours and sweat equity and hard work back then. So that's how I kind of earned my keep. But anyway, let's go ahead and start off. So spring has sprung in the Rio Grande Valley. And I'm going to mention first the typical sequence of spring blooming in native plants. The first thing that you're going to see, even as early as November, is pink mint or Drummond's mint. I brought some of those from my yard for donation tonight. And they cover my yard right now. They're the first thing to bloom, and they're first thing to feed hungry pollinators as they come out of the cold or hibernation or whatever they do during the cold months. This is a black bumblebee here on this one. And they seed very readily because you see the tiny black seeds up there. They are all up and down the entire stalk. So once you have 2 or 3 of these, you're going to end up with a yard full. And they're very, very nice. They're very showy. Next is the Huasache. That's our harbinger of spring. It's the first tree to bloom, and they're blooming right now. The fragrance is so nice that the essence of the flowers has been used now for several hundred years to produce fine perfumes in Europe. They say Chanel has part of its recipe is some Huasache. And to me, it smells like Johnson's baby powder. I don't know if y'all remember that, but I had 3 little brothers growing up, and Mom liberally dusted them with that stuff. And to me, that's what it smells. I think of my brothers whenever I smell Huasache. The prickly poppies, and they're making a nice show right now too. There are 3 species of prickly poppy. The first one that we'll talk about right here is the red poppy. You can see the Latin names for things. I'm not going to point those out because it'll slow us down, but it's Argemone sanguinea. They come up from the ground while the weather's still kind of cold in little rosettes of prickly leaves. In the red poppy species, actually you've got white, pink, purple, red, kind of reddish, and maroon. It's got a wide color variation. Then this is the golden prickly poppy. It has got a fabulous flower. It's very lacy and delicate. And the thing that separates it from the other group is they have more than or equal to 150 filaments, dark brown filaments inside, and they're very showy. The next one is the Mexican poppy, and I have this one growing right now in my yard. And what separates it from the other golden poppy is the fact that it has fewer filaments and they don't lie flat on the flower. They're yellow colored, and there's 50 more or less per flower. Then the pearl net leaf milk vine, or I call it just the pearl milk vine. These are gorgeous flowers. Now, honestly, I have not seen them used as a host plant for monarchs or queens or soldiers, but I like them just because I think they're beautiful. And I planted this one in my yard in this pot, and I put it under a Grande that was growing up into my mesquite. And so it's there still. It has made it up to the top of the mesquite during the warm months. And the center of the flowers has what looks like a pearl. It actually shines like a pearl. And here are the seed pods are kind of strange with these tubercles that come out. And I have collected seed off of this. Just think it's a lovely vine. Then the prostrate fleabane is blooming also now. And this tends to grow in kind of low places. It does well in a container, in a pot, and it's a good nectar source for pollinators. As you see, there's some type of little bee or fly there on that flower. My pot of this lasted about 5 years before it played out, and the foliage is pretty during the rest of the year, but in the spring it puts up all of these beautiful flowers. Ritama. This usually blooms after Wasache has gone to seed, and the green trunk, the stems, and the petioles provide most of the photosynthesis. So this plant is uniquely designed to live in this type of semi-arid environment that we have down here. And of course, it makes clusters of beautiful yellow flowers with a little red markings also in them. This is a very good pollinator plant and a good source of nectar. This one I put in because I just wanted you all to know that this kind of thing exists here. We do have a native peach. It is endemic to Texas. It grows in the sandy soil and the sand sheet in North Hidalgo County and Star. Ken gave me a seedling, and I planted it in a container thinking that that would be the best way to grow it. Well, it lasted about a couple of years, and I had another seedling come up here, but I think my mistake was I did not put it in the ground. I think the roots, once they hit the bottom of the container, even though it was a clay pot, I think they needed to keep on growing down. But it's a beautiful plant. It makes tiny little peaches, and they turn a dark red or orange when they're ripe. And in the wild, usually the birds get them before any human could. They don't have a whole lot of flesh on them, but they're a really cool plant. The spotted tuberose, which I call Manfreda maculosa. Now this one has gotten a lot of notoriety lately because it's the host plant of the Manfreda giant skipper. And this skipper has not really been seen and reported since about 2004. However, there are reports that there is some on some of the federal tracks, I think, east of Rio Grande City, and the National American Butterfly Association has acquired what was Chihuahua Woods, and now they call it Pixie Preserve. And in the National Butterfly Center in Mission, they're propagating a lot of this Manfreda in order to plant it at Pixie Preserve in mass quantities and to try to attract this Manfreda giant skipper back into the valley. It's a very, the skipper is kind of like finding a unicorn, to be very honest with you. It's rare. But Jeffrey Glassberg, who's the president of NABA, said that, quote, "I will die a happy man if I can find a Manfreda giant skipper at Pixie Preserve." So I hope he can die a happy man. This is wonderful in cultivation. I had this purple kind of morph with the foliage, but the one that's surviving now is green. But the flowers are wonderful. They're aromatic at night. They start to smell when the sun starts to go down. It's gorgeous fragrance, just fills the air. Southern pepperweed or peppergrass. And this one is an annual, and it just comes up in spring. It's in the cabbage family. And these little narrow seed pods, this is not a great picture that I took, but are called siliqua. And they form a long row below the flowers, and they're edible. Joe Ideker showed me once that you can snap this off, and it tastes kind of like radishes, and you can actually eat them in salads. So, and they're in full bloom right now. Oh, full seed, I meant to say. Then there's the pincushion cactus. It's really, in my yard, it's the first one to bloom in the spring. You can see this ring of flowers that's typical of this Mammillaria hyderi. They're very easy maintenance. You just really leave them alone. One thing to be careful with any cacti in a container is not to overwater or they will rot. The coral bean, you'll probably have seen this one. All of parts of it are poisonous, so it's something to be careful of. But the hummingbirds just love the nectar on this. I have a large one in my yard, and it has spread seed to other places in the yard. So it does spread seed readily. And then we have our prairie milkweed. And this one has gotten a lot more popular lately with folks that want to try to help out the monarch. And it is a great host plant for the monarch, the queens and the soldiers, which I call the royalty butterflies. Those are the orange and black butterflies. This grows out in the wild in huge groupings, usually in kind of a low place. You see them a lot in ditches, and they have a huge tuber underneath. So part of the year, the vegetation is gone, but the plant is still alive underground. And then it'll come back up and shoot up leaves, and then it'll make flowers. And so it kind of comes and goes. And that has kind of prevented it from being sold a lot in nurseries because it's not a gee whiz flower, it's kind of comes and goes. But I know a lot of folks are planting it now, propagating it for the monarchs and the other butterflies. This is a devil's head or a horse crippler cactus, and these do well in containers also. They make this gorgeous fruit, and the birds love to eat that fruit, and they spread the seeds all over the place. And I always find it kind of ironic that such a feathery, lacy flower like that is set right in the middle of these devilish thorns, these spines, that really probably would cripple a horse. But they're starting to bloom right now. They're budding out in my yard. They haven't done the actual flowers yet. It's a prickly pear cactus. Okay. I find that they bloom right around Easter every year. And of course, most of you will know that the prickly pears are yellow. The flowers are yellow. But the closer you get to the Gulf Coast here, the more colors you see in the blooms of all different colors, except a blue. You don't see that color. More than one year, Ken and I and my daughter have gone out to the Lomas, to the area where they have all different colors, and we've collected a pad of each different color. And we brought them to my house and planted them in a row, and you can kind of see the different colors that came out. These are all of the colors that we had along that fence, that hedge. The hedge lasted about 3 years. They had to be about 2 years old before they started to bloom, and then they bloomed about 2 years. So I'm going to say maybe 5 years. What really took it out was a freeze, and then guinea grass started to grow in them. And I did not have the heart to ask my yard guy to go in and pick guinea grass out of this prickly pear. So it finally went away. But look how colorful all of that is. And the tunas, the fruit that they make, the indigenous people down here use them as a main food source. And historical reports say that they moved camp about 2 times a year just to be near the biggest amount of tunas with the most prickly pear colonies. And one colony was just north of the Arroyo, and it was probably somewhere like in Willacy County. They're very special, and they make great jelly. The tuna makes super jelly. Our speaker next month is popular for her prickly pear jelly. And I know that Benito Trevino's wife, Tony, makes a great drink with it. So it's special. And this one, we actually found one that was almost white. You see that? That's as close to white as you're going to find. So that was fun. We should do that again. Now, when you get their gardening catalogs in the mail, you see butterfly bush a lot for sale. And those are from further up north, and they've got magnificent flowers. They're all colors, and they're very showy. We have a native butterfly bush, and it is not showy, but it is wonderful for pollinators. It is right now blooming, and it's just full of bees and flies and goodness knows what else, just literally buzzing. It only occurs down here and not very far from the banks of the Rio Grande. The flowers have a kind of a sweet, pungent smell. Ken says that it smells like the inside of a dog's ear. And I happen to like dogs, so that's not bad. And I really like the scent of it. I enjoy it. And they get really big. I think Mike Heap sells them. And they'll grow up into a tree, up into the top of the tree. That's what mine has done. This is something I'd like to promote. I wish a native plant nurseryman would sell this. It's called California loosestrife, and it grows along ditch banks in Cameron and Willacy County. We acquired ours in Willacy County. Then later on, I found some with a friend in Cameron County. They're very showy. It's just once a year, but it continues for a good month and a half, almost 2 months, this type of blooming. They grow really well in plastic pots because they are from the low areas, ditch banks and such. And this white one here is something that Robert Gaitan and Barbara Pete found, and it is a different species of Lythrum. And they found this somewhere in San Benito at a school campus. So it's just really showy, and I think everyone would enjoy having that in their yard or in a container. Bailey's ball moss, one of my favorite things. It is an epiphyte. It is not a parasite. So if you find it growing in a tree or a shrub, it is not using that tree or shrub for anything more than structure to attach to. They get their nourishment from the air and the water vapor that's in the air. So you're going to see them growing near bodies of water, either old or new bodies of water. And they love to grow in ebony trees. That's their favorite thing to grow in. They'll also grow in Tanasa, which is related to ebony. And they just have to have something with thorns that they like to grasp. They bloom in the spring. They put out these pink fuchsia blooms, and the hummingbirds literally fight over them. I collect them from places where they've fallen on the ground. Once they fall on the ground, they're as good as dead because they get the mold and stuff out of the dirt. Squirrels eat them. Those roly-poly bugs get all over them and start to to break them down. So if you find them on the ground, it's good to collect them. And what I do, since I've kind of run out of room on my ebony tree, I make hanging baskets of them and I hang them up in my mesquite, and they do very well there. They require very little care. You can spray them with the hose once in a while, it helps. Spring ladies' tresses. This is one of our native orchids. And the first time I ever saw this was over in South Padre, between the visitor center and the boardwalk. And they're just gorgeous. They make a big show once a year. They put up the vegetation and then they put up the flowers. But after that, they die down. So most of the year, you're going to have a pot with dirt in it, but it's worth the show. I like to put them in container gardening with different natives. That way they're showy once, and then when they die down, another one is showy. So, but they're very pretty. They have a tuber underground like so many of our native plants. They also were lining the road out to Boca Chica to SpaceX now, and Ken and I rescued a few before it got to where people couldn't go down there. So they like the coast and the island. This I'm just putting it to show you. This is one of the next bloomers, and this is our twisted rib cactus. And it's nice to grow in containers. Has a red center that's really showy. This is a basket flower. And that little puppy up there in the corner is my little dog, Marlo, and she's my creative muse. She goes outside with me every day when we work. In fact, she gets tired before I do. She wants to go back in, but she's a great little pet. So Robert very kindly put that up in the corner when he made this presentation for me. Basket flower, really great flower for pollinators. That's a black swallowtail there that's nectaring. Here's a bee up here. And it gets its name basket flower from the bottom part of the flower, involucre, I think they call that. It's branched and woven together to where it looks like a basket underneath. It only has disc flowers. It doesn't have ray flowers. But the really neat thing about these flowers is if you touch them, they move. They wave, they move like in a wave. And I learned that accidentally when I cut some and took them to work and left them in the office for everybody to enjoy. And one of the ladies in medical records came running into my unit and said, "Oh my God, they move," you know. And she said, "I was admiring it and I just touched it and it moved." And I said, "I don't think so." So she took me and showed me they literally do move. And that is called nastic movement, when a plant moves to the stimulation of touch. It readily reseeds itself. It's coming up right now. They come up in rosettes. And I have some that get 8 feet tall. I mean, they're really, really enormous and very pretty. Turnsole, Indian heliotrope. And there's a little debate about if this is native, but I think the latest, didn't mean to do that. I think the latest information is that it is native to this area. In fact, might have been taken from this area to India, to the Asia and in that area. And they're really wonderful for queen butterflies. The queens can't leave it alone. The flower is really pretty, and it looks really good when you put it in a mixed container. And the thing is that even after the plant dies, the queens are all over it. And I'm sure the monarchs would be too if they were here then. Because there's an alkaloid that this plant produces that is a precursor to the pheromones that the butterfly creates in order to reproduce. So it's a really cool plant to have in your yard. And once you have some, you're going to have a lot. It reseeds. Texas vervain. I really like this because of the growth structure. It's so lacy and feathery, and it is so pretty when you put it in your garden with other native flowers that are different shapes. And I collected seed originally on a ditch bank on the campus that I worked on, and put it in the yard, and it just comes up every year over and over. The flowers are very tiny and delicate, but they're kind of a blue to lavender, very pretty. This is pencil cactus, rat tail cactus, or succoseal. And these grow up in the drier western part of the valley. They have a sort of a weak base to them, so they grow up into shrubs and trees for support. Well, what I have in my yard is trellises that they can grow up into, and they make a magnificent show. They're just starting to put out buds right now, but they're so pretty. And you can be driving along in that part of the valley, the western part of the valley, and suddenly see this bright color coming out of a shrub or something. And sure enough, it's a pencil cactus. Purple fleet leaf iris is another one of my favorites. And this one grows usually in the sand sheet, but I have found that it also grows really well in my Cameron County yard, and particularly well in my container gardens. And it makes a nice complement to a mixed container because it comes and goes. This is actually, it is a native iris, and part of the year it'll bring up leaves like these, and then it'll make flowers. Then some of the times there's 2 or 3 on one stem, and they're very showy. And then of course, after it goes to seed, which are easy to collect, the top part of the plant dies, and there again, it's living underneath the soil as a tuber. So one mistake people make a lot with natives, they see that there's no visible plant, that it, and they throw it away because they think it's dead and there's nothing there. And 9 times out of 10, it's alive. It's just underground. It's a tuber. And you can imagine the kind of heat and dryness that we have. A lot of our most beautiful natives grow from tubers underground to conserve water. Blue-eyed grass. This is another native iris, which I really like. It's not a grass, of course, but the leaves do look kind of like grass. And I have some now that's shooting up the flower stalks and almost ready to bloom. It grows really well in clay pots. This is ladyfingers. I brought a few of those also for donation today for my yard. They're really easy to get cuttings of. This is the Echinocerius pentalophus with the yellow or creamy colored throat. These grow up and down the valley, really. I think Ken in his book says that the ones in the western part of the valley have a thicker stem and a darker color to it. The ones this way are thinner. But I just think they're gorgeous, and they just put on a show in the spring like the other cactus, and then that's it. But they grow really well in clay pots that are porous. And this is sort of, to me, this the cousin of the other one. This is a Echinocerius berlandieri. You find this along the banks of the arroyo, and I don't know that you find it too far west of here, but I've done a lot of walking around out in arroyo brush, which is one of my favorite types of plants, and it's all under trees. It grows in shade. I had some out in the sun, and Ken suggested I put it in the shade, and it has really done well in the shade. This extremely handsome, rugged man here is Robert Gaitan, and I want to thank him. He's the one, he and his wife Barbara, that put this presentation together for me last year for the Texas Master Naturalist. Not only is he handsome, but he's very smart with IT, and we've really relied on him a lot here in the Native Plant Project. He's on our board, and so is Barbara. 3 wet times of the year. Okay, the next thing is when to plant. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm just observant. And I do believe in climate change. I think last summer was one for the books, the record books. But basically, from 40 years of observing, we do have 3 wet times of the year here in the valley. The first one is in September, although it didn't happen this past September, but it happened in October. Mostly we have calm, ground soaking rains then. So a good time, and we'll talk about this a little more, a good time to plant, the best time to plant is around Labor Day here in the valley. December is our next rainy season, and you get good, calm, ground soaking rains then also, but with an occasional freeze. In June, we get rain. I kind of call it our monsoon season because those rains are unpredictable, and they do include thunderstorms, sometimes hail, floods. They're kind of crazy, so they're not super reliable for watering our plants, but it does occur. The best time to plant. They say the best time to plant, and Mike Heap says this and has for years, is around Labor Day, the end of August, early September. It seems kind of crazy to be planting then because it's still usually really hot and dry. But if you go ahead and plant and then these September rains come, they really soak the ground and help the root systems to get established, especially for trees and large shrubs. Then if they're planted, then already in the ground, they get the September rains and then they get the December rains. The second best time is in the fall before the December rains come, especially for small trees, shrubs, and some seeds need to be planted around that time. So here's Robert, and so I guess his friend, and a Texas master naturalist, I would assume, planting on the island. And then the third best time to plant would be right about now, between February and mid-April, especially with medium to small shrubs, ground covers. It is a good time, but you're going to still have to water regularly because the next significant rainfall will not be really until June. And then, as I said, it's going to be a little bit unpredictable. And we've got these March winds that I think have already started. Yesterday and today was unbelievable. The worst time to plant, as you could guess, would be June, July, and August. Because it's so hot and the plants struggle to try to maintain a decent root system. And you're just going to have to be watering it continuously. But if you do, find something that you can't live without and you just want to get it in the ground, just be sure and water it very frequently, actually. To mulch or not to mulch? To mulch. And why? Maintain moisture, and it also protects it from heat and cold. And you don't get all those things that I don't want to call weeds, but they're volunteer plants that come up that you don't really want with your loved one plant. And so they also, as they break down, they invite microbes, healthy microbes, to come in and create nutrients for the plants. So it's a very good thing to mulch here. Whenever you're planting something new, and you should reapply it about twice a year. I say December and June. That's 6 months apart. Also, if they're putting new walkways in nature parks, the best thing to use is mulch. It's very quiet, and you can sneak up on some cool wildlife that way without like gravel crunch, 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 you know. So how much? About 3 to 4 inches around new plantings or new walkways. And you want to keep the mulch away from the base of the plant, or it could possibly rot the trunk. So, as I said, apply it as the mulch gets thin, which it will. It'll start to disappear. Then you reapply it, or at least twice a year. What kind? Well, just make sure it doesn't have a lot of trash in it or plastic, something that won't break down. You don't have seeds from a bunch of exotic trees or shrubs. Some people get big bags of leaves off the curb. Just make sure that it has leaves in it and not something else. But I rely on the McAllen Recycling Center. Even though I live in Harlingen and the highways are awful right now, I go there because they have reasonable prices. You can look them up on this website, and they put all the mulch into your car, and you can get different. They have also compost, and so it's a real nice place to support. And fertilizer. Well, do we need fertilizer on native plants? Actually, not a lot, because they have evolved to get the nutrients that they need. But when you plant in a subdivision on a lot that was raised up or leveled off, and you don't know what kind of field dirt was put there, I recommend using fertilizer. It does help. Fertilize twice a year, like right before you mulch, because it's been proven that the fertilizers, like the dry ones, the granules, will dissolve more easily and nourish the plant better if it's covered with either dirt or mulch or something. I use Osmocote. It's dry, lightweight, it's easy. It comes in a shaker bottle, and I was actually a little late getting mine out this year. I was shaking it out there in the backyard yesterday evening. You don't have to mix it with water, and you can spread it across large areas in your garden and then put it in your containers as well. You have to remember, of course, to water it, the plant, to dissolve it, to mix it in. So here's the thing about Osmocote here. Preparing for the summer. These toes belong to Robert and Barbara. I think that's Barbara on the left and Robert on the right. I just feel certain about that. Summertime plant prep. Okay. You're going to keep mulch there because you're headed for some heat, and you want to keep your plants hydrated and protected. Mulch protects from heat, and it also protects from cold. Also, with your plants in late June or early July, go ahead and prune back, because leggy plants, the plant has to work a lot harder to hydrate the ends of a leggy stem. And so I find that when you prune back about halfway, you're going to leave enough leaves for photosynthesis there, and you will it'll make it through the summer a lot more easily. And just be sure and keep the ground soaked around the plants at regular intervals. We're still talking about plant prep. Woody plants, we're talking about containers now. Usually just fill the water to about an inch over the soil line at regular intervals and let it drain out. On cactus, you just lightly water every 2 weeks or so in late June to late August. The rest of the year, it's best to just let the cactus just have rainfall water, because I have overwatered. Of course, I live in Cameron County. We have a higher amount of rainfall typically, and I have killed more things from overwatering than from underwatering, especially cacti. And you remember, well, I can tell you, I've been to these environments where they grow out in Starr County, and they're in some incredible heat and direct sun, and they just don't need a whole lot of water. But I'm really big into container gardening. I got the idea from my daughter. She came back to the Valley after living in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 7 years, and she had containers in her little patio home, apartments and stuff. And so we started going out and getting containers, and I just really enjoy it now. There's several reasons why. It just gives you more flexibility in the time that you plant them and in the time that you want to plant seeds. You can cover them easier when the freeze comes. Also, you can pull out unwanted seedlings by just reaching out and just pulling them out. You can keep them weeded better. Rare plants last longer in containers, I found. I lost some really wonderful things by just sticking them in the ground, and then everything grew over it. So also, if you're going to be planting seeds to transplant later seedlings, the way to go is with containers. Okay, there's all kinds of pots out there. The terracotta pots, you can get them in the box stores, but they're kind of limited as to shapes and sizes, and they dry out quickly because they have thin sides. Aluminum troughs, I buy at Tractor Supply, and I get my yard guy to drill holes in it, and they're really great for sprawling plants like Gaillardia. They are really nice in them and things like that. But you've got to be sure and get those holes drilled, and several of them. Plastic containers, they're very available in different shapes and sizes, but in my experience, they are not ideal for most native plants down here. They retain too much moisture. The only exceptions are natives in Cameron or Willacy County that thrive near water. Of course, they're good for germinating seedlings. My favorite for natives is Mexican pottery. And I want to clarify, I thought most people would understand when I said Mexican pottery, what that meant. But when Robert was making this program for me, he said, "What are you talking about, Mexican pottery? Do you mean coffee cans?" Because that's what my mom used for her pottery. And that coffee cans are fine if you put enough holes in the bottom. But what I'm talking about is the clay porous type of pots that you find at import stores. And we have plenty of those around here. The clay is porous, it drains out well, and the plants seem to live longer, and they just feel more at home because these native plants still think this is Mexico. They don't know that, it's not, and they speak Spanish and everything. So they just do so well in Mexican pottery. It's inexpensive. You can find them, like I said. I go up north on 77 out of Harlingen, and I go to Sebastian Pottery. That's who I recommend. Don't be confused because they have gorgeous things like Talavera pottery in there, but they're expensive, and the glazed surface doesn't work really well to keep a healthy root system. Also, some of your clay pots are sealed with a tar-like substance. That is to retain moisture, and it helps preserve the integrity of the pot. But you have to be careful what you're planting in the ones that have the tar sealant in them. Something that needs less water would do better in an unsealed clay pot. Okay. I kind of have a little method that I use here. The natives to Starr County and native cacti, succulents, use an unsealed pot, clay pot. They're porous, they drain better. The natives to Hidalgo, you can either use sealed or unsealed. The natives to Cameron and Willacy, either sealed or plastic. And the natives that thrive near water, either sealed or plastic. And how do you know where they're from if you haven't gone out and seen them like I had the great fortune of going out and seeing? If you have Plants of Deep South Texas, written by Alfred Richardson and Ken King, with every plant, there's an area entitled Distribution, and it tells you what counties that the plants are from. It helps you determine what kind of container you're going to use for planting. I don't put rocks in the bottom of my pots because I've had too many sad experiences where my plants drowned because there was a round rock covering the hole perfectly. And I didn't realize what was going on until the plant was dead. I was giving it more water, you know. So it's a bad scene. I put like a folded paper towel to keep them from coming out. Water, you know, to keep the dirt from falling out. Cacti, I like to put in round or oblong flats. Shrubs need a deeper round or square pots, and then large woody shrubs or small trees do well in pots also. They need to be deeper, of course, and round or square is best. You can top the soil off twice a year, like the same time that you mulch. You can sprinkle some osmocote there and then top it off with some soil. It really helps. Also, in a pot, you don't want to let the plant get too big because the root system is in a container and it's going to be limited. So you don't want to let the foliage get a whole lot bigger than the pot. Oh gosh. Okay. The mix of soil, I use an organic potting soil, perlite, and blood meal and bone meal. And for cacti, add 1 or 2 quarts of crushed shale. I think we have a handout about that, don't we?
Yes, and I have Kitty Bottom for help.
Okay. Okay, for the shale. Right, okay. Okay, now we'll talk a little bit about seeds. Let me see. Okay. I call seeds little miracles waiting to happen. I love collecting seeds. And I have this saying, if we humans collect seeds, it is our unspoken duty to plant them or share them with others who will plant them. There's no need to stockpile seeds and never plant them just because we can. So you can collect seeds any time of year. Many of our natives bloom throughout the year, and they bloom typically after rain. So you just watch the blooms until the seeds develop. And so all of these here, you can see the seeds are ready to pick. And you're going to have to clean them in various ways, of course. You know if the seed is ready if the stem of the seed pod is brown and it no longer is providing nourishment for the seeds, or when the seed pod or seed cluster is dry or turned brown or beige. Green seed pods are not ready. So don't pick them or you're just wasting perfectly good seeds. If you can't check a seed often, you can put an organza bag that you can get at a dollar store in the wedding section. It's for putting rice in at weddings, and cover it, tie a bow or something, and then come back later and collect the seed. You have to check them kind of often though. I always recommend to use both hands when you're collecting seeds, because if you don't, you can take the whole plant out, you know, or a whole branch off by just jerking it with one hand. And a lot of seeds have little nodules right above the seed on the stem of the seed. The pea family has them, and so does the mallow family. So it's easy to break them there. It's almost like being scored, like a pill that you can break because it's got a line through it. And I use pockets to separate, to collect seeds in while I'm outside. I have a carpenter's apron from Johnny's True Value that I use sometimes. I have paper plates inside the house that are sitting there ready for me to dump seeds out of my pocket when I get inside. And it's good to stack them because some of these seeds will just fly open the minute they hit a different temperature going from outside to inside. I have 3 favorite vines that are all in the pea family, and I keep them in a little brown bag with a clamp on them because I can hear them just pop, 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 pop in there after I get them in the bags. So how do you store them? First, you clean them before you store them because you need to remove vegetation. because if you don't, you could have some type of critter in there that's going to eat your seeds. Or it might be some mold that will mold your seeds. So I store them in paper bags secured with a paper clip. I put a label, the name, and the collection date. Plastic bags are a no-no because they promote mold to grow. They don't give enough air exchange or enough oxygen. So I don't use plastic bags. Also, before I plant, I soak the seeds in warm water overnight, and I stir occasionally with my finger. This is my oxygenator, my finger, because I don't have a bubbler, but that just increases the oxygen content. So with all of that, you master naturalists and everybody else in the valley, we can get to work and start doing wonderful things that completes the program.